coming out tonight. It's a great pleasure to be here in Aniota and at the Red Dragon Literary Reading Series. I want to especially thank Danny for bringing books tonight, and Ms. Ruth Carr for all of her correspondences and getting me here. And I really you need to give a hand of applause to Professor Hovis here. For 2.5 years, has it been, that we've been working on this, and then of course the world went crazy with a disease that has killed millions of people, and it's still killing 1,400 people a day in the United States. But we don't care about that right now. So I appreciate so much being here in the Perna Science Building with the periodic table there, because it's all mixed up, right? We who are good with words should also appreciate science, because it's telling us something about the great journey that we're on, our great journey through this mystery we call life and the universe. So as Professor Hovis mentioned, I lived in Stockholm for a little while where I taught, and there's a joke that the Swedes like to tell about Americans, and it goes something like this: What does an American offer for a welcome drink? Choice. And it's kind of true, you know. You come to my house and I'll say, what would you like to drink? You know, we have red wine, white wine, orange juice, even tap water. So I'm giving you a choice tonight. How would you like to proceed? Would you like me to read one story all the way through, which might take our time, or a smorgasbord of things I've prepared to sing out? One story all the way through. Okay, would you like a story that's a little poish, or a story that's a little trouble no more-ish? Poish, okay. This is a great story behind the story. The story is called Selah. Selah is a phrase like amen or something that comes from the Bible. So I had the opportunity to be at Yaddo some years ago, and an assignment to write a story about my neighborhood in Atlanta for an anthology called Atlanta Noir. So the stories had to be based in a neighborhood and had to have a dark center to the story, something, in this case, poetry. And what I learned while I was in Saratoga Springs at Yaddo was that it's a very haunted place. And one of the ghosts that haunts the place is Edgar Allan Poe, who actually drafted part of, some of this, by the way, is fiction, just in case you're taking notes. You know not to say it on the test. I've had that happen when people say things on the test about Ernest Hemingway. I'll say, oh, that was a joke. But you pass anyway, because I'm an easy teacher. But anyway, Poe drafted the Raven, part of the Raven, while he was on the property that is now Yaddo. So one night sitting there, I felt a cold breeze move through the room, and I felt it was the spirit of Poe, although it was 15 degrees outside. It could have been that too. And I am a Southern boy, so a little chill like that can seem unearthly. Selah, based in Inman Park, Atlanta, Georgia. Inman Park is a Victorian neighborhood. It is also the site of the Civil War battle. And so one can imagine that there are a fair amount of spirits there as well. Okay. I can hear sounds I've never heard before. The creaking of the floorboards, the footsteps on the stairs, the aching grind of the door hinge. These are common music in this century-old house. The sudden ping of acorns striking the roof, the groan of the giant water oaks, and the fluttering shadows they cast from the streetlight playing through the rooms, the scramble of the roof rats in the attic, the possum's hissing growl as she makes her midnight tramp. These noises I delight in. The more vigorous, the greater my delight. But it is the voice, the sweet, babbling voice of the child that gives me all the more pleasure. What is she saying? Nevermore or evermore? You don't hear it? Yes, you hear it too. Long, 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 many minutes, many hours, many days, you and I shall hear it evermore. Her little voice gives all the more certainty that I am the instrument of the Most High, and the vengeances I exact are pure and justified. Selah. Was it only a week ago? 6, no, 7 days, perhaps only 5. The first cool evening of autumn after a long, too long Indian summer. I'm a gentleman by all accounts, and when I stepped out of the front of the house and saw a pair of pine beetles crouching to spring across the threshold, I stomped my feet rather than crushing them and sent them scurrying into the beehive of dried leaves that had accumulated on the porch. I was gleeful in spite of the dull, dark, damp, and soundless day. The low-hanging clouds seemed to lift rather than oppress my spirits. I felt the kind of giddiness one gets from a toke, just a toke, remind you of weed, as that's all I manage these days, skipping over the rotten plank on the steps and through the iron gate, just the gate, the fence having long ago rusted away, and into Druid Street, named for the oaks which tunnel over it. The street's name has nothing to do with priests. I heard a squirrel bark. I recall that barking and the scratching the rodent made as it ran around the eaves of the turret with its one vacant eye-like window. One could think, a witch lives there. But no, it is only a nest to rodents. Night and day I have heard their kits peeping. My philosophy is to live and let live, so a squirrel in the attic is nothing to me. I do not fight against nature, but people, that's a different story. Though I should say not all people. 40, 50 years ago, my neighbors were wonderful people, just like me. It was when the neighborhood was in decline according to our tour guides who glide through on their segways, simply robotics, simply robots. Declined, they say, from its Gilded Age glory to a hippieville, the grand Greek revivals and Queen Anne's given over to tenements and flop houses and to hippies. They say, now it has been rescued. This is the language they use. On the brochures, on the websites, the gentrifiers, I've heard them cluck and cluck and cluck at my house. It needs painting, they say. The windows need repair. It could be lovely if only, remodelers, landscapers, New Yorkers and Californians. This is from an Atlanta perspective. Saws and leaf blowers all day long, and their self-congratulatory tour of homes and festivals, so-called arts festivals, t-shirts and earrings. What do they know of art? They have Home Depot'd everything except the sidewalks, the 100-year-old tiles beautifully buckled by the water oak roots, cracked, crushed, missing. That's art. May they break their damn ankles on it. But that day, nothing bothered me. I strode up Euclid Avenue, past the colorful Queen Anne's and craftsman bungalows, reveling in the change of season, the cool air, the billow of storm clouds glowing in the sunset, bats like phantoms looping through the air, and the barred owls hoo-hooing. I passed the woods at Springvale Park, where the owls live and where the Wiccans still hold their lunar rites among the silver-barked beaches. On the spur of the moment, I decided to go to the Porter. I liked sitting in the very back of the narrow dungeon of a club and drinking an ale. Perhaps I'll even eat a brat and a sauerkraut. Then I noticed the child. I was passing the hill at Sibley Park, an ostentatious collection of contraptions of Scandinavian design meant to entertain the spawn of said gentrifiers. Oh, such precious urchins! God forbid they play on a swing. When the ephemeral look of the child startled me, I peered hard. But no, she was a child of this world, 6 or 7 in age, naked except for a ragged, oversized t-shirt that draped her like a tunic. I see the homeless all the time. In the old days, those Hippieville days, they squatted in the old mansions abandoned by commerce and condemned by the state. Now they haunt the periphery of the district. They wander haunts and camp at little 5 points, but would be hustled along by the IPP if they ventured into this purlieu, private police. The IPP, I call them. "Where's your mama, little girl?" I asked, my tone to convey my caring nature. I was concerned that a chill would catch her. Already, her bare arms were pimpled with goosebumps. "Where do you live?" She was of indeterminate race, light-skinned black, Mediterranean, a mix of some kind, a tangle of sandy hair matted her head. I came closer, resisting the urge to reach out. As I said, I'm a compassionate man. In a sudden burst, she fled, running like a Hiawatha to the playhouse, a construction for the gentrified children to play house. Ha! The melancholy house of Usher is as if any one of them expected to clean and cook as adults. I followed the child, not chasing, but approaching cautiously. 2 souls crossed in front of me, walking the path toward the train station, a double murder from 2 decades ago. Inside the square little playhouse, among the scatter of toy pots and sand buckets, was the girl holding tightly to another figure, girlish too, and only slightly larger. The larger, older one was perhaps in her mid-20s. Her youth, though, was blanched, and her face, yellow and negroid, was blooming with purple and pink bruises, a cut on the lip. We stared a moment, and then my breath came back to me. I whispered, "Are you all right?" The older one, the woman, drew herself smaller, wrapping herself around the child. They were cold. I had only a light jacket and immediately stripped it off and held it out to her. With a quivering hand, she took it and nodded slightly to show gratitude. And true to her maternity, she fitted it on the child, whose frame it swallowed up. If ever there was a need for the police, I thought, it was now. I broached the subject carefully, as I myself have a well-cultivated distrust of the law. The woman's reaction was blank, but the bruises spoke loudly. I stepped from the playhouse, took a deep breath, and surveyed the park as it fell into a miasmic darkness. a thin fog seeping from the ground. Street lamps ringed with prismatic halos illuminated the marble steps of long ago raised mansions which led up the hill to nowhere. I flipped open the phone and dialed 911 and waited. After several rings, far more than any dying soul would have lasted through, a voice asked me to leave a message. I am a patient man, as patient as I am compassionate, but I have little patience for such sloppiness. I resolved at that moment that I would be the hero. I would help the poor woman. I, not the Atlanta police, and certainly not the IPP. They were but functionaries, paid help. They helped they helped without compassion, and I called to it by the highest power, the power of God, or power of the gods, whichever. See that? I raced down the hill toward the street, toward home. The damp grass clumped between the sole of my sandals and my toes. Some hand grasping my ankle nearly tripped me up, but soon I was on the sidewalk, walking swiftly home, my mind relisting what I must do to save the child, the mother. Suddenly a light blue and holy burst around me. I tasted the contents of my stomach at the back of my throat. Such excitement is not good for the heart. Then out of the light came a figure, burly and haloed, my knees weakened. Hey, partner, where are you going to so fast? Hardly an epiphanic salutation. It was a damn cop. True to calling, they come when you least need them. Officer, I intoned, appropriately obsequious. It is the best strategy around them, especially around the black ones, and this one was not only burly, but as black as a moonless night, and yet in the foggy street lamp, he glowed somehow. The bulge of eyes, the round jowls, the monstrous chest under his shirt, and his massive arms swollen in the sleeves, which acted upon the veins like a tourniquet. Anabolic steroids. Mum's the word, dumb's the word. I was just running to call for you, for assistance, I explained, and he, fiddling with the gadgets pinned here and there upon his person, talked in a gibberish of codes, to which a cracked and popping voice replied. Whatever they had to settle was settled, and reluctantly the cop, hefting his big frame up the hill, followed me. He shone his flashlight inside the playhouse like he was chasing down a fly. Finally, it rested on the pieta, cowering in the corner by the play cook stove. Though blunt and gruff questioning, through blunt and grunt questioning, he ascertained the obvious. They were homeless. If they ever had a home, they had been driven out of it. What do you want to do? He asked the mother, and to her credit, she didn't answer him. He turned the question to me. What do you want to do? What can I do? Do you want to go to the Pine Street shelter, ma'am? He blurted. Her response shocked me. No, she wouldn't. She'd been there. She said it wasn't safe. It was crowded and filthy, and she would rather make her bed where she was. The forecast called for cold, and the child's nose was snotty. If she don't want to go, the cop said, I would arrest her for trespassing. In jail, she'd be out of the cold. The cruelty of his suggestion, his arrogance, nearly sent my hand against his fat head. I looked to the sky. A half moon slid behind the skyline, diffusely ablaze as if shining behind theatrical scrim. It was God speaking, and I knew the mission. I'll take her. Take her where? The Buffarillo asked. Did he suspect misconduct from me? To shelter, I'll find succor for them, or succor them myself. The cock pursed his lips and asked the woman if she wanted to go with me. I'll have you know, she hesitated. Help on the way, and she hesitated. Then he said she'd have to go with him. Was it such a Morton's Fork, jail, or me? The gods led her to the right choice, and quickly she took the child in her arms and followed me home through the roaming mists. Before there was a city here, either gilded ghetto or hippieville, this was a battleground of the war between the states. Thousands of boys lined up, blasting musket balls in one another's faces. Look out any moonlit night into the mists that gather in the hollows of Freedom Park or the Grove at Delta Park, and you will see them, regiments and squadrons at a time. They're not so invisible. And why should it be strange? Lives have been lived in this place since the time of the unfortunate Creeks, some of whom clung to these very oaks to save themselves from the trail of tears. You scoff. Your arrogance will be the end of you. Life piles on life, hurt on hurt. That is why I, by the grace of the Almighty, am merciful. Several times during the short walk, the woman trailing me disappeared in the fog. I waited until she was in sight, only to lose her again. There is a tale of the apparition that trails and vanishes and reappears on one's back. Thinking this, I was beginning to feel some regret about my bravado as I watched them descend, ragamuffin and ragamuffin, from Euclid Avenue down the hill on Druid Street. You live here? The little mother asked. It was the first time she seemed to have looked at me, her rheumy eyes catching the porch light. It's such a big house. But an impatient flash heated my face. Next she would say it needed paint or repair. You live here all by yourself? There was a pleading in her tone that I caught but did not fully understand. Wait here, I'll run into the yard and get the car. But we're tired. We're tired and hungry, sir. I'll fix you a sandwich, peanut butter, egg salad. Maybe we could just rest a while, just a couple of days. My imagination sprang. What an idea. A lovely young negress in the house to cook and clean and who knows what. She was quite a little spinner. The gentrifiers would talk and talk about this one, and the child, as light-skinned as the child was, she would be thought to be a little family. How we could roam the neighborhood, the graying, balding, long-haired Ichabod and his darling little girls. Just then, an owl hooted and the door slammed. I jolted out of my reverie. Impossible. I went into the yard and brought around the beetle. Peach tree, everywhere is peach tree. That's tourist talk. Beware the Druids. Beware the Decatur's, the Cabs, the Morelands, the Memorials, the Capitals, the Hardys, the Aarons, the Williamses. They writhe like a tangle of snakes, and we travel them all, she and the child, scrunched together on the back seat, the springs of the passenger seat having cut through and made it uncomfortable, if not dangerous, to sit there. We went first to one shelter for women and children, and then another, only to be told that like old cemeteries, there was no room in the tombs. Am I not? Yeah, do that. I told you there were spirits. only to be told there was no room in the tombs. And I lost my place.
You have to hold that.
Oh, how is this working?
Is it on?
It's on. It says it's on, therefore it must be on. Okay. Okay, something's going on here. But anyway, I'll just pick up here. Once I got a call from Southview Cemetery. Generally, I'm not compelled to answer the landline, solicitors, you know. But for some reason, the receiver seemed to beckon. It trembled in the cradle. Hesitantly, I answered, and a chill crawled from my coccyx to the nape of my neck, and then spread like a contagious itch across my scalp. "It's your auntie," the voice said. It was Auntie's voice, and yet it was not so. "Auntie," I said, "where are you?" "I'm in Southview Cemetery. I'm waiting for you, waiting." My dear auntie who raised me, and how I treated her, abandoned her. Had I the presence of mind, I would have asked why she was in a colored cemetery. In life, she would have never associated with the colored except Louisa, her maid. She refused to go to the tea room at Richards after integration. She voted for Lester Maddox. Then, when she died, I inherited the house just as the neighborhood declined into Hippieville. And at her funeral, there were only me and Louisa. Now she calls from Southview? The rooms of Tartarus are heated by ironies. Selah. But I'm determined not to be among the damned. I pressed on shelter after shelter with no room in the inn. The night grew old. The poor child nodded, whimpered, shivered, though I blasted the car's heater. The mother, clutching the child, cringed and said nothing. I spoke, not loquaciously, but with good cheer and encouragement. At last we drove up to a little soul-saving station on a short, poorly lit street with overgrown and abandoned lots. Pope Street, or Hope Street, or it could have even been Dope Street. It seemed so much on the edge of nowhere. The square, whitewashed building with its slanted steeple nonetheless buoyed our expectations of succor. I helped the darling mother and child from the cramped backseat, though reluctant she was to take my hand for fear of losing grip of her daughter. I offered to carry the girl. I am good with children. They might be brash with others, but they're quiet around me. We walked the muddy path to the building, guided only by the dim bud light next to the door. There was a sign written in red block letters against the whitewashed Lighthouse of Deliverance. A large, very black, purplish black Negroid woman, no girl, she was all woman, peeped through the inner door, leaving the security door locked. What breast, I thought, you scoff? It is a compliment that even in that hour of exasperation, I took heed of the well-formed breast and the curved, ample hips. I am a man, not a priest, though priestly in my nature. Can I help you? Her voice was gruff. I have come to blow your house down, I wanted to answer, but turned my tongue to better purpose. We seek shelter. She studied the three of us, her mouth turning down as she looked me over. Quickly I clarified, for the woman and child, not for me. I saw the moment of decision when the suspicion dropped from her face and the vixen unlocked the security door. My little woman practically sang out a sigh of relief. The child, sensing her relaxation, chirped and gurgled. Was it nevermore or evermore? In we went through the narrow, stale hallway. It might as well have been lit by gaslight. On the walls were portraits of the living Christ, as blonde as a movie star. His eyes followed me. We were taken to a card table that served as a desk, and our Hottentot Venus had begun to ask questions for her forms. Bureaucracy haunts every kindness. The room behind her I could see served as a sanctuary, though it was sparse and void of any of the ornamentation that God expects in a place of worship. The few pews had been dragged into the periphery of the room, and on the floor, about 3 or 4 feet apart, lay 3 rows of twin-sized mattresses, 10 or so in a row. Each mattress was bare, but covered with a blanket, and on each, all of them except for one, reposed a soul. This was the shelter I had driven so long to find. The innkeeper, such as she was, gave me the evil eye. She turned her lips down smugly. Not good enough for you? She challenged. Any room in my house would be a palace by comparison. I'll take the little charges home rather than have them spend 10 minutes in such a kennel. I'll house them in Auntie's grand old boudoir full of cobwebs and dust bunnies. How she would spin in her grave at that. Round and round she'd go, where she stopped, and only the devil knows. They could become my wards, my little family, Papa, Mama, and baby. The thought enticed me and gratified me. It's good, the mother replied. The child babbled like a happy brook. Yes. I then thought, happiness for them, a great sacrifice for me, but the greater happiness and just a little and small sacrifice. Seeing I had done all I could do, all that was expected of me, I smiled, reached to pat the little cherub on the head. She shrank back, but I touched her scruffy little naps anyhow. I drew in deeply, the close air catching in my throat, and turned to leave. Then the big one stopped me. Her voice boomed. I turned to see her thick lips moving in a slow, bubbling motion. You be paying? Pardon? You be paying. $20 a night. I thought this was a charitable enterprise. She rolled her neck. It was as if her head danced on her shoulders, and then it settled. She smirked and conveyed both incredulity and menace. I stepped back to the table, my hand itching to slap the baboon. No doubt she saw it in my eye and slid back the chair with a squelch, ready to meet the challenge. Oh, but she couldn't have known what a scrap I'll give her. It was the child then, touching me lightly on the arm, who drew my attention. Her eyes wide and watery, pleading, her mouth quivered, and my heart broke open. I found my wallet, slipped out a 20, and flipped it like an ace of spades onto the table. I had another 20 and flipped it out too. 2 nights, I said. That took the smirk off of the vixen's face. And when I looked at the child, I nearly burst into tears to see her happiness, her once tired face suddenly bright. The mother closed her eyes and formed a silent thank you with her lips. That portrait of the living Jesus turned his head away in shame. And the sun portals of heaven opened and rained light down upon me. You got ID? The wench gasped. ID, the mother whispered. The thing rolled her eyes at me. She needs to show ID. I saw distress cloud my little mother's face. What does she need ID for? It's for her own safety.
For her own safety, in case she comes and goes. I won't go, the poor mother managed. I'll stay right here. I won't be going out. Them's the rules. Them stupid rules, I mocked. Obviously, she has no ID. She's homeless. Look at her. She's been beaten, thrown out, abandoned. The head was dancing again, and the big woman stood. You might not like the rules, but these are the rules. No ID, no bed. Whose rules? My rules. I changed tack. Obsequious now. Sorry, so sorry, listen. I took out my wallet and put a $20 bill on top of the other two. I'll pay extra. What do you want? 20? 30? How dare you scoff? She put her hands on her hips, inhaled, and the big chest filled out. Now she had the upper hand. A pine knot of a horn swelled above her left brow. The shadow of a tail flicked behind her. I saw then that I played against a devil, but devils can be tamed. I don't want your money. I was doing y'all a favor till you come in here all what? All too good. Glee cackled in her voice, and her lips trembled and played down. Y'all need to go on to Pine Street. Pine Street will take her in. Better to go to hell, the mother said. And you can do that too, said the witch. Outside, standing before the rusty beetle, the mother turned to me, standing close, whatever kept us distant, melted for a moment. Thank you, she said, but I'd rather just sleep outside. She clutched the now weeping child whom she had held the whole time. But I wouldn't allow it. I drove to Pine Street. Hardly had the engine shut off when the hands were helping the mother out of the car. Resignedly, she passed the child over to one of the young souls, and she was led away, living into the tomb. The steel door clanked as it shut behind her. Gloom pervaded me, and iciness, a sinking, sickening of the heart, and unredeemable dreariness of thought. My mind was in a swirl. I fought to satisfy myself that my little family would have shelter, incommodious though it was, shelter and $20, and I would never see mother or child again. But as the gods would have it, I would see that anthropoid bitch again. Ha! I am nothing if not a centurion in the army of good. She would pay for her falsity, for none are so false as those who pretend to do good. I waited for her through the blackest hour of the night, passing into the dreariness of dawn. And there she came, on all fours as it were. I bagged her head. Oh, how she did fight, kicking and scratching and screaming such vexations that my ears hurt. In that neighborhood, such commotion draws no attention. Good twine held her, and I stuffed her under the hood of the beetle. Ho-ha! The little car shook with her struggling in the trunk. It took effort, but the strength of the gods were, as they are always, with me. Kill you? Now I scoff. I have told you how I am merciful, but no, you shall keep company with the rats and the squirrels and all the dark shadows that creep and crawl into this whole turret. That is how I am directed. The sweet little voice always in my ear. What does she say? You heard it rightly. Evermore is what she says. Selah.